Good morning. My name is Paul Rosler. I'm the political science faculty here. I'm not Ted House. I'm political science faculty here at the community college. I just wanted to welcome you to the first day of Democracy Days. We have if you haven't seen the schedule, there's a whole long list of activities in the next 3.5 days through Thursday afternoon. So tons of opportunities to come and see stuff. And I want to thank you all for coming. It's exciting that we're going to have engagement on important topics facing St. Charles, Missouri, and the world, in U.S. and the world, and all these events. So a lot of important topics being discussed in the next 4 days, basically. Today, I'm here to announce, welcome former state senator and former circuit judge, Ted House. Ted was an elected official. I just confirmed it. He said 32 years in public service here in St. Charles, and and he's here to talk about what he sees as a crisis in education. So please welcome former senator and former judge Ted House.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. How's our volume? Does that sound all right? Good. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Students, are everybody awake? Okay, it's Monday morning, but at least it's not a 7 a.m. class, right? So, do they have 7 a.m. classes anymore? No? 8? Maybe? Okay. Well, I thank you, Professor Rosler, for your invitation and your introduction. I appreciate it. I'll just continue to introduce myself a little bit so you all know who this person is that you came to see this morning. I did have the opportunity to serve in elected office for 32 years in St. Charles County. My state Senate district also included Pike County, Lincoln County, Warren County, and Montgomery County. Anybody here from any of those? Where are you from? Warren County, what high school?
Oh, well, I didn't graduate.
Okay, very good. Warren County High School? Warrenton? Okay, very good. They're playing St. Charles West Thursday night in football. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Where's Karen? They're okay. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So I've been looking forward to this. Thank you all for taking time. I know how busy college students are, and I really appreciate you all taking time to join us today. Want to talk a little bit about public education and supporting public schools. We're in a public school, right? So what better location? What better opportunity to do that? I got to serve for 6 years in the Missouri House of Representatives, and then I served for 8 years in the Missouri Senate. And we have term limits, of course, now in the Missouri legislature, right? So I was term limited out of the Missouri Senate, and I decided to come home and run for judge. St. Charles County is the largest county in the state that still elects the circuit judges, the trial judges. When we say circuit judge, that's the trial judge in the St. Charles County Courthouse, okay, in St. Charles. So we still elect them. Most of the counties our size, or the bigger ones, have what we call the nonpartisan court plan, but where the governor selects from a panel, and then they stand for retention. But in St. Charles County, the trial judges are still elected. We have partisan, contested political elections for judges. We could have a 1-hour conversation about whether that's a good idea in a county of 400,000 people, right? But that's not our topic for today. But anyway, I loved being a judge. Tried criminal cases, general civil litigation, and I got to be the presiding judge of the 11th Judicial Circuit. Missouri has 46 judicial circuits. In our case, it's just St. Charles County. It's a 1-county circuit, and I enjoyed that job for 18 years. So we have lots of presentations about the Constitution and civic education, legal concepts, and maybe, Paul, we can do those some other day, but anyway, do we have any pre-law? Anybody maybe pre-law, future lawyers thinking about it? Kind of, sort of? Okay, good. So that young lady in the previous section that got a 178 out of 180 on the law school admissions test, that's pretty cool. So anyway, one of the things I got to do in the Missouri Senate was work on the bill in 1993. I'm showing my age here. We called it the Outstanding Schools Act. Governor Mel Carnahan put forth this bill. It was a high priority, major package of public education initiatives. And in 1993, we established the A+ scholarship program. Is anybody here today on the A+ program? Raise your hands. You all, that makes me feel so good. I'm thrilled that you've taken advantage of that. What a great opportunity. It helps pay for the first 2 years, right, at a community college or a trade school or tech school. It was very controversial at the time. It was very expensive, of course, to pay for that. The bill included a $310 million tax increase, mostly on higher income Missourians, to help pay for improvements to funding the formula that funds public education in our local school districts, and then also to fund the A+ program. And so a lot of folks didn't want to vote for the tax increase, but I just figured it was such a great investment in the future of Missouri and giving young Missourians an opportunity to get started with their college education. And I decided, even though I'm from a conservative county, St. Charles County, I came here to support public schools, and if I don't vote for that, why am I here? And I've never regretted that. So if you're on the A+ program, congratulations, and I hope that continues to work well for you. So we believe that, getting to our topic here today, by the way, in terms of St. Charles County schools, who's here from Orchard Farm? Anybody? Yes? All right. That counts. That's very good. St. Charles School District. There we go. Any students? No? Francis Howell. Who's here from Francis Howell? Yeah, which school? Central? All right, good. How about Wentzville? Yes, okay, which school? Liberty, the new one, right? And Fort Zumwalt? Okay, we've pretty much got all the bases covered here today. So I'll disclose up front, one of the things I've been doing politically since I retired is working with a political action committee called St. Charles County Families for Public Schools. We believe strongly that public education is the bedrock of democracy. It's absolutely essential. You can go back to Benjamin Franklin and the founders of our nation, absolutely essential to a free society, to an educated populace, and that public education is one of the first things that was established when the United States was young, even before then, and that it's just as important today. St. Charles County is the wealthiest county in the state of Missouri. Did you all know that? Per capita, we're wealthier than any other county in the state. How many counties in the state? Anybody know? Trivia question? 114 counties, plus the city of St. Louis in Missouri. Yeah, there you go. What was your guess?
I guessed 47 because of the circuit count from earlier.
There you go, okay. Well, some of those circuits have multiple counties, so I tricked you, I'm sorry. So we're the wealthiest county in Missouri, but be that as it may, we've got great public schools. And we think that nothing is more important to living in a thriving community, economically thriving, socially thriving, than to have high quality public education. And we've got great public schools by any metric in St. Charles County. We believe that you don't have freedom if you don't have an educated citizenry, right? It's much easier for an authoritarian or oppressive government to take over, and if people are not educated. And finally, the whole idea of equality of opportunity depends on not just the privileged getting to go to a good school, right? But who? Everybody, right? That's one of the keys to public education, is that everybody gets to go. Okay? Regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your ability Okay, if you're a great student or a mediocre student or a not so good student, regardless if you have different abilities of other folks, public education is there for everybody. So I mean, it's kind of fundamental, we think, to democracy. You know, I don't have to tell you all that things are kind of difficult politically right now, right? It's very partisan. We're polarized. And people are kind of going to their different tribes and their different corners, and you know, they're not talking to their relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. They'll talk about football, but don't talk about politics, right? It's a tough time because of the way things have evolved. It's pulling people apart, and everybody kind of goes to their corners and they watch, you know, this group watches this newscast and this group watches this newscast, and it's like they're living in different worlds, right? They're getting different information, and it's like they're living in a different parallel universe. The one institution that remains that is so important to bringing our communities together is our public schools, because that's the one thing that's left. You know, our jobs don't bring us together anymore. That's very diverse, which is actually a positive thing economically. You know, we don't have a lot of, a religion doesn't bring us together like it used to. Everybody doesn't go to the same church in the same community, you know. And of course the politics has really driven us apart. But our public schools are the one institution that really brings us together as a community. We think that's very valuable. And that's worth fighting for, and that's worth protecting. And again, available to all citizens, regardless of race, creed, religion, ability, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. When I was your age, people were very upset that they took formal prayer out of public school. That was a 1962, I think, U.S. Supreme Court decision. The school board wrote the prayer, and in the school at issue in that case, and the students had to recite the prayer every day, and their teacher made them recite or led the prayer that the school board actually wrote. Okay. Now, nothing against my good friend Karen O'Hearn, who's here, or any other school board member, but I don't want them writing my prayer. Okay. I'll figure that out. And you don't want to write my prayer, do you? So, what I'm saying is, our public schools are secular. And they should be, and that's a good thing, okay? I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, but the public school is not the place for me to impose that upon you, okay? And it's so great to have a system of public education where we respect freedom of thought and intellectual freedom and the freedom of free exercise of religion that's guaranteed in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, right? That's really important. So public education is enshrined in the Missouri Constitution. Here's the article straight from the Missouri Constitution, Article 9, Section 1A, and I know you can read, but it's so important. I'm going to just read it. A general diffusion of knowledge and intelligence being essential to the preservation of the rights and liberties of the people, the General Assembly shall establish and maintain free, that's a key element right there, free public schools for the gratuitous, free instruction of all persons in this state within ages not in excess of 21 years as prescribed by law. That's been in the Missouri Constitution since, well, it's in the 1945 Constitution, and actually language very similar to that was in the 1876 Constitution as well. The Missouri Constitution says that we are to fund public education before we fund anything else. And when the legislature, and I was on the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives, when we come up with the appropriations bills, always the first bill is public education, because that's the priority of state government. So there it is right there in the Missouri Constitution, Article 9. Look it up. Okay. So I'm going to sound a little political here, but I think it's hard to honestly discuss this with you without making it a little political, because it is political. And I don't want to be partisan, but I do think that we need to understand the political implications of this. There's an effort from the political right, okay? And the left certainly has its issues at times, right? I'm not saying that, you know, one side's all great and one side's perfect and one side's not. But there is clearly an effort from the political right now to undermine public education. And that's what our concern is. We know it's a national effort because the same things pop up in multiple states. It's not just organic or locally confined just to St. Charles County. The primary method, the primary attack on public education right now is to defund it. It's to take the money away. You've heard the phrase, follow the money, right? On this issue, follow the money, because that's really what this tends to be all about. The idea is to, what they're trying to do is take the money away from public schools and divert that money to private schools, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that. By the way, if you have questions along the way, please raise your hand or interrupt, okay? And I'll have some questions for you later. I don't want to stand up here for an hour and do this all by myself, but I'd be very interested in your thoughts and comments. Yes, ma'am.
So if they're going to take money away from public schools and put it into private schools, will they make those private schools easier to
Did you all hear that? So the question is, and you must have written my PowerPoint since you asked that question. So and I didn't pay you to ask that, did I? So the question was, if they want to take the money away from public schools and divert it to private schools, will the private schools then be easier to get into and have the same regulations and standards that the public schools have? And the concern is no. And we'll look at that a little bit. You know, public schools have to accept everybody, right? And that's a good thing. And of course, and the private schools would not. I have a caveat that I want to be very clear about. This is nothing against private schools. Okay, we have some great private schools in St. Charles County. Okay, and around the state of Missouri. God bless them. If they want to have a private school, knock yourself out, go have your private school and make it as good as you possibly can. I just don't think that the taxpayers ought to pay for it. And I sure don't want to take the money away from the Fort Zumwalt School District to fund your private school. And that's the concern, is what's left behind if instead of one public school system we have 2 or 5 or 10 that are funded in all these different ways, all with different standards. We've certainly lost that community feeling that we talked about earlier, right? So we'll develop that a little bit. But I just want to clarify, you know, nothing against private schools. Got, you know, a lot of friends went to private schools. Got a lot of kids in our great private schools. Okay. The concern is that cutting public funding for education would deprive people of opportunity. Equal opportunity, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about egalitarianism. We're not talking about everything being equal or everyone having the exact same thing or the exact same abilities. We're talking about equal opportunity. That's what I believe is the promise of American liberty. Public schools, they need to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? That costs a lot of money to do that, okay? That's, you know, it's understandable why private schools don't want to comply with that. It's very expensive, right? But very important to do. Private schools can select the students they wish to admit. Public schools admit all students, right? The concern is a real reduction in educational quality. That would result. Think about who was in band? Anybody in band? Yeah? What'd you play? Piano and flute and saxophone? You're very talented. That's good. Anybody else? Band? No? Okay. I was one of my proudest offices was the president of the Francis Howell North Band Boosters Association. And let me tell you, if you can survive that job, you can do any job in politics. That was a challenge. Let me tell you, we loved it. A lot of great people. So how about football, soccer, baseball? Got any athletes in here? Yeah. What do you play?
Soccer.
Yeah, still?
No.
No? Okay. Where'd you go? School?
I went to Borgia.
Borgia. Very good. Good for you. All right. So those programs are fundamental to education, art, music, sports, the extracurricular things, right? When I was the chairman of the education committee in the Missouri Senate, they came out with a lot of this neurobiological brain research, and a lot of this was new stuff, and we had some seminars and tried to educate ourselves about a lot of this new research about how the brain functions. And you know, we used to think that brain development was complete by about 18, and now we know it's more like 24, right? Before the brain really is developed and settles into the personality that people will be. And one of the things that we learned in all of that was that the most important class taught at any level of education is kindergarten and first grade art and music. That emphasizing those classes will do more to improve academic performance later on in life than anything any school can do. Actually, the younger the better. Pre-K is we know now is absolutely critical, right? And so, you know, those are the kinds of programs that would have to be severely curtailed if the public schools lose their resources, right? Not to mention teacher salaries. There's a shortage of teachers right now, right? You've heard about that. Does anybody want to be a teacher, by the way? Please? Yes? Yeah? Yeah, good for you. Tell me about it. What inspires you to be a teacher?
My mom actually works with kids who have autism.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm going into the same as her because I like younger children because she works with like kindergartners, like third graders, and it's just she does a lot of work that she doesn't necessarily get a lot of credit for, but
Well, that's teaching in general, right? Yeah.
but yeah, she works really hard. No one works as hard as she does. So
There you go. Well, they certainly do work very hard. Teacher? Yeah? What kind? Do you know yet? Or?
High school,
Yeah?
SPED maybe, I'm kind of still observing the classrooms and seeing where.
STEM?
Yeah.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Thank you. Okay. My wife is a mechanical engineer at Boeing, so I married a rocket scientist. It's pretty exciting. So yeah. Yes, sir, Andy.
I taught for 10 years, and I taught kindergarten through college, actually. I taught
There you go.
5-year-olds to 23-year-olds.
Which was the hardest?
I loved kindergarten. That was my favorite age, let me put it that way.
Okay.
And I liked having a self-contained class all day with the same kids. I think the biggest problem I find in middle and high schools is the putting them in different units of 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I did that, I couldn't stand it. I loved elementary school where I had the 30 kids, 35 kids all day long.
And you had them all day, and they were yours all day, and
Mine,
yeah,
and they were my kids. And
yeah.
I don't know what you think about that, but I was going to suggest charter schools, because I know in St. Louis and Kansas City, they allow charter schools. You didn't mention that, but you also mentioned good schools.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you define a good school? And, that's why charter schools, I guess, were allowed in St. Louis and Kansas City.
It was an experiment, if you will, in those urban core areas to determine if that might work. Unfortunately, the results have been disappointing in the charter school experience. We were thinking of ways to try to do something different, innovate, try to help those urban core schools that were struggling, the large urban school districts to try to raise academic performance, and did not work too well. So hopefully that will not be expanded. But it's really critical that we be able to pay teachers, pay them well, and of course make that career attractive, because it's vital. It's absolutely vital for the survival of American liberty.
So,
Yes, sir.
Do all public schools get the same amount of funding? I'm sure they have different funding depending on which districts they're in.
There is a formula in statute for the funding of public education. It's very complicated. I used to actually be able to recite it. They call it the foundation formula. And the answer to your question is no, they don't all get the same funding. There is a school of thought that school districts should be funded so that they get the same amount of money per pupil. It's never been that way. It probably never will. It does cost more money to educate kids in certain areas of the state over other areas. That seems inequitable, but it's a concern. Obviously, there's an economy of scale. If you have a real small rural school district, with 100 kids in the high school, that's a different economy of scale than a high school with 2,000 kids. And of course, what that formula allows us to do is the wealthier districts tend to fund their school districts better. And that's a question of equal opportunity as well. So lots of politics go into that. The legislature has never been able, like I said, St. Charles County is the wealthiest county per capita in the state. The legislature's never been willing to tell St. Charles County, you've got the money, but you can't spend it on your kids, even if you want to, even if the voters will vote for, the tax increase and to fund the schools. They've been unwilling to do that. And so if you live in a rich area, you typically go to a better school. Long conversation we could have about that. So to itemize this a little bit then, what we see is the top legislative threats to education in Missouri. I've got down here vouchers, tax credits, open enrollment, intimidation. Let's break those down a little bit. Who knows what vouchers is? You want to take a stab at that? You ever heard of that? Vouchers? So the idea with vouchers, this is what's being proposed. And again, I'll just be out front and say, I think this is a bad idea. Just so you know where we're coming from. The idea with a voucher is that, so you lived in what school district?
I live in Jefferson City. It's like 2 hours away.
Oh, well, Jeff City High School, that's like yeah. And they finally built a new school, right? So, yeah, Capital, yeah. Which one did you go to? Yeah. What, was there like almost a riot when they finally decided to break up Jefferson City High School? Yeah, it was a big deal, right? I'm sure that's why it took 50 years to do it, right? That and the football team, yeah, okay. So in vouchers, the idea is you live in the Jefferson City School District and we're gonna give you, whatever, $8,000. It could be whatever the number is. And you can take that money and instead of you going to the Jefferson City High School, you decide you can take that money and go to a private school. Okay. Sounds great, right? The question is, what happens to Jefferson City School District when a third of the kids leave? And not just a third of the kids, but a third of the money. What remains of that school district? And then you've got not one publicly funded school, and then you've got 2 or 4 or 6 in that community, and have you lost all semblance of community? Have you lost all semblance of equality of opportunity? So that's what a voucher is. The money basically follows the student. Okay. Oh yes, ma'am, Karen.
Yeah, my concern with vouchers too is what keeps a private school from raising their tuition. If you tell a private school we're going to give your students $8,000 apiece, what keeps them from raising the tuition $2,000 the first year, $2,000 the second?
So she was saying what's to keep the private school then from raising its tuition and taking advantage of the fact that now there's a bunch of public money floating around out there and we want it. And so there's no regulation on what they can charge. Which leads us to a very important point, which is that the public schools, of course, are run by the government. They're regulated, of course, by the government, if you will. The private schools are not. And so if you give the private schools the public money, do all the strings come with it? Or do they not? Do they have to admit kids with disabilities, or can they just keep them out, if they don't want them right now? Yes, sir, comment.
The private school, if they got more money, like a public school would have to have some sort of system for where it chooses what to fund with its money. But a private school, they could pay different parts of the staff or the leadership different amounts of the thing. So part of the money that goes to a private school doesn't directly go to education.
You're saying part of the money that the public money, the taxpayer money that a private school would get would not go to...
It would go to they would go to principals or whatever.
Sure. Well, for staff and all the other needs, yeah. I mean, there wouldn't be any public control of the public money. There's no accountability or little accountability. I think that's part of the concern. I think that's what you're saying, yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, years ago I heard that the head of the teachers union was in New York City and was criticizing vouchers, and the head of the Catholic schools raised his hand and said, we'll take any student you want, you give us the money and we'll educate them. And the idea of vouchers is to take them out of a failing school. Now you assume that a third is going to leave. The whole idea of a voucher is, particularly in inner cities, like you said, that aren't doing the best job, to take them out of a failing situation and maybe putting them into a school where the kids would succeed.
That's certainly, I think, the idea of a lot of proponents is if you're in a school district that's not doing very well, then it provides that alternative. My response to that is there shouldn't be a failing public school district. No public school district should fail its students, right? And so, to me, the answer to that question is let's make sure that we properly fund and properly equip our public schools so that we don't have that situation. Now, the argument, of course, is, well, competition is good, and so that'll force public schools to get better or to become more efficient or whatever. And goodness knows, don't get me wrong, public schools can be better and they can be more efficient, and we're not always defending the status quo. We certainly want the innovation and things that we need to continue to learn to do to be better. But if you have competition in the marketplace, you have winners and you have losers, right? And again, I don't think there shouldn't be any losers. We don't want our public schools collapsing because a private school was able to, for whatever reason, put them out of business. What's left when we do that? That's the concern. Was there a hand back there? Yes. Yes, thank you.
The vouchers directly taken from the public schools, or is it from the education budget as a whole and given to the student or the private school that the student is choosing to attend?
Question is the money from vouchers, does it come straight from the local school or from the state pool, the budget? It just depends on how the state would do it. It would likely come from an amount that's appropriated by the state, which means they'd have less money to fund the public schools. So that's the concern. Karen.
Private schools, by their nature, too, have always been selective.
Mm-hmm.
They have the right to, as a 30-year public school teacher and counselor, I enrolled many students who were thrown out of private schools for a variety of reasons, either an inability to attend regularly, disability, inability to pay as much as they wanted them to, and just general behavior or grades. So it's kind of their nature to be weaning people
Yeah,
out.
I think most private schools would want to continue to be selective. Otherwise, they lose whatever their niche is. Yeah.
The idea of sending them our failing students, they've been sending us their failing students for many years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Paul, how are we doing on time? What time is it?
We're good. It's only 12.
Okay, all right. Tax credits. Now, Missouri actually has a limited tax credit program that the legislature just initiated a year or two ago. The question is, will they expand it? And a tax credit is just a credit off of your state income tax liability, right? So this is a different way of funding, of taking money away from public schools and giving it to private schools through a tax credit. If you send your kids to a private school, then you qualify. There's certain qualifiers because it has a limited amount of resources right now for it. But then you would get a tax credit and you'd pay less state income tax. So it's sort of it's an indirect way of doing the same thing. What it means, of course, is less revenue for the state, less revenue for public education, and the money goes to the parents and then to the private schools. So it's a different way of accomplishing the same thing. And again, Missouri started that a year or two ago, and we'll see where that goes. I don't know. I don't remember the number right now. It's limited.
It's a maximum of like 4,000. Because they set aside like $27 million in the budget to do this as a pilot.
Yeah, it's a pilot program. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Chris Finelli is the state representative that went to sponsor the CEO of St. John's. You can look him up if you want to know more about it.
It's means tested too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's means tested, right. So if you're poor, then you can get the tax credit.
There is a means test on the pilot program.
I think it's important for people that can't afford it. We're talking
The other thing is open enrollment, and that could even be a public school open enrollment. For example, you can take private schools out of the equation. You can decide which public school to go to. And again, it sounds, well, that's appealing. That's, what's wrong with that? I live in St. Charles. Maybe I'll go to St. Charles High School. Maybe I'll go to St. Charles West. Maybe I'll go to Francis Howell North. Or Orchard Farm. They're building a new school. Maybe I'll go there. And it sounds attractive. But again, the concern is, let's say St. Charles West has the best football team. And so all the best athletes decide to go to St. Charles West. And St. Charles West has the best marching band, and so the musicians decide to go to St. Charles West. And so is that the situation that you want? My biggest concern about open enrollment for public schools is what happens to the rural school districts. Because you've got a lot of I grew up in a small town in Missouri, Fayette, Missouri. Has anybody ever heard of Fayette, Missouri? Yeah, okay. Central Methodist University, that's where I went to college, in Fayette, Missouri. And so Fayette is like a small town surrounded by a bunch of smaller towns that still have their school districts and want to have their schools. And so my concern about open enrollment is everybody in that county, most of the kids who want the better academic programs and the upper level science classes and the math classes and the marching band and the athletic teams, and they may go to Fayette, and those surrounding school districts would collapse. They simply wouldn't have the tax base left to be able to function. I'm very concerned about what open enrollment does, because again, you have winners, you have losers. And some schools would ultimately just collapse, and there wouldn't be anything left. Yes.
About the open enrollment, wouldn't schools have a cap on the max students? Because my school, we had X amount of students per classroom and everything like that, and I feel like they just can't accept every single student in that open enrollment.
So your question is there a cap on the number of students that can transfer? I think the legislative proposals that we've seen in Missouri do have a cap. It may be, and I don't know what it is. I hate to give you a percentage. The concern, of course, is and I know very well how the legislative process works, if you get a foot in the door, then it's easy later to expand it. That's the concern I have about the tax credits. Right now, it's very limited pilot project, but it could easily, with a legislative action, be expanded to be devastating to public schools. It takes 5 days under the Missouri Constitution to pass a bill. 5 days. That's all you need. Now that rarely happens because the legislature is rarely that organized or able to put it together. There's usually a lot more debate that goes on, but the legislature can do a lot of damage in a very short short period of time, which is why we have to be vigilant. And then the other concern here is the efforts to undermine public education is just intimidation. Anybody have any idea what I might mean by that? Let's look at that. Okay. Vouchers, again, just to recap, parents given a voucher for thousands of dollars, comes out of the state budget. Money can be spent for private schools or even homeschooling. Public schools lose a major percentage of their funding, begin to collapse, and we end up with a fragmented system. That's really the concern, is that instead of one public school system that we want to make as good as we possibly can and not have failing schools, we have a fragmented system of several publicly funded schools, and there's no way that can be more efficient. Let's look at the Missouri Constitution again, Article 9, Section 8. And this is the provision of the Missouri Constitution that prohibits public money going to fund religious schools, okay? Prohibition of public aid for religious purposes and institutions. Neither the General Assembly nor any county, city, township, school district, or other municipal corporation shall ever make an appropriation or pay from any public fund whatever anything in aid of any religious creed, church, or sectarian purpose, or to help to support or sustain any private or public school, academy, seminary, college, university, or other institution of learning controlled by any religious creed, church, or sectarian denomination, whatever. You know, folks, a lot of times the Constitution isn't very clear, but it doesn't get much clearer than that. Okay, if you sort through all that those words, it very clearly prohibits any kind of public funding for religious schools, and that's why a lot of folks think that vouchers is unconstitutional, and it is. In the state of Missouri, clearly, if the school's controlled by a religious creed, if they have if it's a Catholic school or a Lutheran school or any other kind of school, any other religion, I'll fight to the death for their right to exist and have their school, but the Missouri Constitution prohibits the public funding of that school. And this has been the law in the state of Missouri since 1876. So this has been in the Constitution for quite some time. So we need to remind our legislators that it is unconstitutional in the state of Missouri to use public money to fund religious schools. And again, for good reason, because how do we protect, this is First Amendment stuff, I know you've studied this in class. The best way to protect your freedom of religion so that you can attend, believe what you want to believe according to your conscience, and what you feel God has given to you. The best way to protect that freedom is to make sure that your neighbor has the very same freedom, and that we don't have an establishment of religion in the United States of America. And some people see that as a contradiction, but no, I mean, I feel strongly about my faith, but the best way to protect my faith is to make sure that I'm not imposing it on you, because I don't want you imposing it on me. And that's what the Missouri Constitution says. And we are really getting in dangerous ground when we start funding private religious schools in the state. Okay. Tax credits, again, we went over this. Taxpayers receive tax credit for sending their children to private schools. That means public schools get less, enrollment drops, and we've already enacted a limited tax credit scheme. Open enrollment, parents choose between public schools typically, causing some districts to flourish while others collapse. Is that the system we want? I don't think so. We don't want winners and losers. We don't want great schools and terrible schools. And I'm concerned that the states that have tried this, that's where we're headed. Yes, sir.
In my opinion, we already have schools in urban areas that are fragmented. Mm-hmm. So with this open enrollment issue, I don't really see a problem with it. Those schools are already basically collapsing. Underprivileged kids aren't getting the same education that people in wealthier school districts are getting.
No question about it. The academic performance in the urban school districts is much worse by metrics than the wealthier schools, right? And so the question is, how do we address that? Yeah. So, yes, ma'am.
Another issue with the open enrollment is transportation, which is a major issue. Getting the kids to the school they choose to attend. And, you know, that's as of now, lately, as I talked about, it's going to be the responsibility of the parent to transport the child back and forth to the school they choose to go to. And then it becomes a matter of privilege. You know, the students whose parents have the time and can afford to take their children. And I would also like to mention rural schools. They have a lot of issues too with this whole thing, moving around. And they're like the urban schools, they have their problems with meeting standards.
Transportation is a real question in open enrollment, because if you can afford to get your kid 20 miles or 30 miles in some rural area to a different school, you've got a real advantage. And so that school ends up with privileged, wealthy kids.
That's why our concern should be just making those schools better.
Yeah. Let's just make all schools better. That's there you go. And now the legislature has tried to address the transportation issue, to be fair, by giving another tax credit or a tax a stipend to pay for transportation. But is that really, you know, the smartest way to do it? But you're absolutely right. I mean, the academic performance in the urban core is pretty rough. Now, why is that? We could have a long conversation about that. It involves all the other socioeconomic conditions in the urban core. Rural school districts often don't provide the same classes and opportunities that our St. Charles County school districts offer. So making that equitable is absolutely the objective. Okay, I mentioned intimidation earlier. One group, Pen America, just for example, this was, you may have read about this in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch recently, ranks Missouri #1 in school censorship and intimidation measures. So what are we talking about, intimidation measures? That's one of the concerns I have about some of the politics here. Legislation that's filed mainly involving race and gender, okay? Who's heard of CRT? Critical race theory. Anybody ever heard of that? Have you heard about it? Do you know what it is? Or the politics of it? You want to?
Well, so it's like all the talk in history class that was about race or whatever. They think that people who oppose critical race theory think that the relevance of race in the past of America should be de-emphasized in school.
Okay, that's one way that has developed, and I hesitate to try to define it because it means different things to different people, and I don't know. I mean, when someone complains about CRT in our public schools, first you got to figure out how do they define it and what are they talking about, okay? Because no public school in the state of Missouri that I'm aware of actually teaches CRT, critical race theory, but they'll say, well, there's elements of it, you know. But I think I want to fairly describe what the concern is. It's that I think what you said, that they don't want the schools teaching the history of race to try to, or racial segregation, or Jim Crow, or slavery, or all the horrible things that have happened in the history of the world, or the history of the United States, or the history of the state of Missouri, which was a slave state, right? Don't teach some 10-year-old kid today that it's their fault or make them feel guilty because their ancestors owned slaves, and so therefore we really shouldn't talk a whole lot about it or try to make them feel bad or guilty or suggest that they're privileged, of course. Okay, I mean, I'm a white guy in St. Charles County. I'm privileged. Okay, I'll tell you right now. I mean, if I had been a black woman running for the Missouri House of Representatives in St. Charles County, Missouri in 1988, I don't think I would have had the same career that I have had the opportunity to have. Okay, I'll just say that right there. So am I privileged as a white male? Yeah. There's to me that's just empirically obvious. We all of us need to do everything we possibly can to fight for racial equality and gender equality and opportunity and all of those things. But it would be silly for me to stand here today and say that I haven't had some opportunity or advantage or privilege that other people did not have. I'm not going to insult your intelligence and suggest that. So, and then of course LGBTQ issues, you know, I mean, the politics around education right now, it's like everything's about transgender, okay? Forget, you know, STEM and academic performance and mathematics and engineering and all the things that schools ought to be doing and teaching. It's all about transgender, you know. There was a candidate for U.S. Congress, no, it was a candidate for U.S. Senate last time, in one of the primaries. Her whole campaign was that we don't want a transgender woman on the swim team. You know, it's all about transgender swimmers. Okay, I don't think we have any transgender swimmers around here. Maybe we do. Okay, but if we do, the Missouri High School Athletic Activities Association has a procedure for dealing that and making that, you know, a level playing field. But you would think that's the only issue facing education right now, based on some of the politics, right, is transgender swimmers. And so, again, trying to create a chilling effect that pressures teachers, librarians, okay, the books and banning books and all of that, to be more restrictive. The problem with censorship of reading material is, you know, people have different perspectives about what's appropriate and what's not. Now, let me be very clear. I want reading material in public libraries, public school libraries, to be age appropriate. Don't misunderstand me that way. There should not be any pornography. It should be very much age appropriate. We need to be very careful about that. But the point is, when you impose some of these nebulous, vague standards on school districts or specifically on librarians, or impose like personal liability for teachers or librarians, that's what we call in the law a chilling effect. And so you don't want to put anything out there because that's even remotely could offend somebody or be even close, because you might get sued, or the school district might get sued, or you know, it might offend somebody. And so then you lose intellectual freedom, you lose all kinds of material that really may, under certain circumstances, be quite appropriate. And so it's the chilling effect that we're concerned about with the book bans and the censorship. But that's one way to intimidate public school personnel. Efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. I used to think those were good things. Diversity, that's a good thing, right? Equal opportunity is what I've fought for all of my life. Inclusion, making everybody feel that they're a part of our society, that they have their opportunity to achieve the American dream and work hard and be successful and, you know, stay in school and get a good education, and, you know, that's that those opportunities are available for everybody. That's a real good thing. And yet some of the efforts now are to tell school districts, school boards, you can't do that stuff. Or school boards to tell the teachers, no more you know, professional development on diversity or equity or inclusion. It has a real intimidating effect. So the culture war orchestrators, again, the whole idea is let's get people to distrust public education. That's how we get the money away. That's how we divert the money to private schools, is we're going to sow all of this concern. It's, you know, they're teaching kids to hate America. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, okay? You all are recent high school graduates, okay? You're 18, right? 19, 18? Okay. Was anybody in this room taught to hate America? Raise your hand if you were taught to hate America. I hope not. Okay, good. I didn't think so. All right. I hope you were taught to love America. I hope that you were taught that if you were taught about America's flaws and about things we've done wrong in the past, that actually helps you and me build a better America. And as a result, that means we love America because of what America can be. Okay. I love the line from Bill Clinton's inaugural address, "There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America." And that's the beauty of American democracy, is that we got problems, but we can fix them. We got problems in our public schools, but we can fix them. We got problems in our society with racial equality and gender equality, but we can fix those things. That makes me love America, okay? And I don't think anybody's being taught to hate America. This idea, young white students are being taught to hate themselves because they're responsible for slavery. I mean, that's preposterous, of course, right? I have ancestors who owned slaves, okay? That was 200 years ago. I've never felt responsible for that. I do feel responsible to help clean up the mess because there's still a problem, right? But it's not, we're not teaching children to hate themselves. Allegations that elementary teachers are grooming their students, like sexual grooming. I mean, we hear this stuff, right? It's pretty wild. I don't know any teachers that are grooming students were any of you groomed to become, no, okay. And then of course there's the social media, bills that are filed, you know, that kind of manufacture the outrage. It's all under the banner of parents' rights, okay? Well, that sounds great. I had 3 kids. I want rights as a parent, but I don't know that every parent should have the ability to you know, necessarily dictate what happens in the schools, right? It's like everything in politics. There's a balance there. There was a recent thing in St. Charles County, and this is actually a nationwide thing as well. They called it Operation Opt-out, where you can fill out a form supposedly and give it to the school district, and your child would not be subject to anything, any third person presenter like me today, okay? Or as a judge when I would give a civic education presentation about the U.S. Constitution through the Missouri Supreme Court Civic Education Program. The kid would have to opt out and wouldn't be allowed to participate in that, only if it wasn't just, you know, strict math, strict science, that kind of thing. Paul, did you have a comment?
Yeah, we're only got about 15 minutes left or so. Do you want to try to wrap up so we have time for questions? Or? Absolutely.
Let's do that. Thank you for keeping me on track. So this Operation Opt-out form said it alleges that our schools that our St. Charles County schools, okay, are engaged in ideological subversion. Ideological subversion. Were any of you ideologically subverted in your high schools? I don't think so. So this industry is well funded. There's a very well funded group called the Show Me Institute. They actually have some good things they're doing that I think are helpful. But basically, they don't like. They want school choice, and they have advocates that are actually promoting virtually eliminating government's role in education. They've got advocates that feel the government has no role in education, and that's a pretty radical thought. Okay, let's see. We need to strengthen our schools. Addressing learning loss from the pandemic, that was a real thing, okay? There's a lot of learning loss from the pandemic, I can tell you that. We need to work on that. We need to expand pre-K. We need to address the shortages of teachers. We need to expand access to AP classes. We need to expand career technical education pathways. If a public school does anything, it ought to teach you to be have critical thinking skills so you can think for yourselves, right? That's what we need to do. How about spiraling rates of youth depression, suicide, mental health issues? That's a very real thing, right? Am I right now? It's hard for someone my age to, how should I say this? We're kind of in the, you know, pull yourself together, you know, generation. It's like, you know, there's no help available. Just figure it out and, you know, let's go, you know. And that didn't work anymore. I'm not sure it worked then, but we absolutely need resources to address those issues. All right, we talked about most of this. So yeah, I'll make the point, we should not be opposed to different methodology. We got to be open-minded about that. No question, room for improvement. But we really don't see any plans for a design or a resource system that provides for a better education for all children than what we have now. If somebody comes up with a better idea, let's do it, okay? And finally, concluding with there is hope. You know, I'm convinced that the people who want to undermine public education are in a vocal minority, absolutely convinced of that. I think most people love their schools. I think you all had decent experiences at your schools. I think the parents of school children currently are by and large quite satisfied with their teachers and their schools in our community. And we need to make sure that those schools are given the support that they need. We cannot allow our legislators to do away with public education. So we started this group. I just threw this up there. St. Charles County Families for Public Schools, and our whole idea is to support families, support the students, support the teachers, and try to protect against the defunding of public education. So check out our website sometime if you want to. So we've got just a couple minutes. Questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know what the studies on the open enrollment thing is, but I think like strategically, if it were easier to pass and did have positive benefits, then if it were easier to pass than improvements to paying for all public schooling, then it makes sense as like a measure before that kind of harder to pass I don't know if it's harder to pass, but I assume it is, of improving the paying of the smaller schools.
So you're saying give it a try or see how it works?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Because if it were easier to pass.
The legislation?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Well, they tried to pass it last year. It did not pass, but that doesn't mean it won't in the near future. I hope I've addressed, I appreciate your point.
Yeah, I think I think you got it. I think your point was that this might be one quick fix that might actually work. It actually would pass. Okay. Any other questions or comments with the microphone where people can hear you?
Do you think some of the kind of things going on with critical race theory and kind of the fear of like banning books and stuff like that in schools, do you think that's kind of based on conservatives' fear of teachers being more democratic? So they think that just because teachers are so democratic, it's like they control the education system, if that makes sense? Like they're scared of the power that Democrats have.
You mean Democrat with a large D in a partisan sense, yeah. So public education should not be partisan, okay? And you'll notice, I haven't mentioned the D word or the R word here today because I don't want to, okay? Because it's not. It's not partisan. It shouldn't be. I think everybody benefits from great public schools. Everybody should want great public schools. And we shouldn't let them make it partisan. We don't want it to be partisan. Now, we may say this is a right-wing attack on public education, or the left wing is doing this wrong or whatever. I mean, sometimes, for lack of better, Professor Roessler knows how hard it is in political science to come up with the label. Labels are so dangerous, to try to define. Sometimes it's just a shortcut for purposes of conversation. We say this is conservative or this is liberal or right or left. But yeah, I mean, we need to try so hard to keep it from becoming a partisan issue. Now, your question is, are conservatives concerned that Democrats control public education? I know a lot of conservative public school teachers, I can tell you that. But it should not be partisan. I hope it never never is partisan. But traditionally, yes, it's Democrats in the legislature that have been the supporters of public education in general in terms of funding and, you know, more resources, and that's always kind of been the case in my experience. But education itself should not be partisan. Nor should school board elections be partisan. We're trying real hard to keep them not partisan. Yeah. Great point. Yes, ma'am.
So since I feel like as a whole, there's been an increase of people believing that there's not much that they can do to prevent like a lot of things happening that are happening in the schools. So what can we do as a whole to really, sorry, I had the question in my head. How can we help prevent partisanship infiltrating schools if we just really want to focus on the education and academics instead of all these things that are politically based?
Great question. We have to trust our teachers, I think, to some extent. Now, teachers need to be accountable and they need to be supervised, and you know, and parents certainly have the right to know what's being taught and what's going on in the class. I mean, I'm all for that as a parent. That's what I want. But I think we need to. We need to be truthful and accurate about what's actually happening. You know, the critical race theory is the perfect example of that. I mean, there's not a school district around here that teaches that. And yet that's the political issue. And so we have to stand up. Someone has to stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not accurate. That's not happening. We're not teaching children to hate America. And that's what I'm trying to do, and our groups, you know. But we just need to we do need to hold our schools accountable, and we do need to make sure they're not partisan. No one wants a partisan indoctrination, you know. The most important thing a public school can do is teach people to think for themselves, equip people to make your own decisions. You may not agree with anything I said here today, okay? And God bless you, okay? Because I hope I hope your K-12 district, and I hope St. Charles Community College taught you to think for yourself and know when you think somebody's right or when somebody's wrong. That's the most we can ever want, right? So you've been very courteous, and I appreciate your attention, but boy, make your own decisions, that's for sure.
We got time for maybe one more.
Oh, Karen, thank you. So, Don, stand up. Yep, this man right here, and your whole team, I should say. They've got a booth outside. Is everybody here registered to vote? You have the right not to incriminate yourself. Let me tell you that. When I taught political science at Lindenwood, you didn't get your grade unless you showed me your voter registration card. Okay, so I hope you are registered to vote. I hope your friends are registered to vote. They're registering voters right outside here. No one will judge you if you're not already registered. It's so important. That's what we're trying to do, is get people to register to vote. Because in school board elections, a lot of times parents of students are so busy living their lives they don't vote in the April elections. We're trying to get people to register to vote and get them out to vote. That's what we're trying to do. So,
can't just register.
Yeah. Well, register and then go vote. So.
And one of the frustrating things, I think, one of the reasons why we have such low turnout, I think, in the United States is because we vote so often. We have primaries, we have school board elections, we have August elections, we have November elections. So we have a lot of elections, but the local elections and school board elections are a place where you can actually, whatever your point of view, whatever your perspective, those are in April. That is your chance to actually affect. Now you all are probably no longer, but you might have kid brothers or sisters in school, or you might still care about your school. But the April elections are a big chance for you to actually make your votes heard, because we're looking at just a few thousand people showing up in a typical school board election. I don't remember exactly, but it's not very many. So, more so than, I hate to say it, than the presidential election, your voice really matters, much more important at the local level for state rep, state senator, district circuit judge, maybe, I don't know what kind of margin of turnout you had there, but that
Great
really
point,
matters.
Yeah. Vote. It really matters.
The average age was 62.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, too. You know who votes in school board elections, guys? Old people. Okay?
I go to city council meetings, I go to the county council, I never see young people. Never see young people, never. Be heard, go to these meetings, email your governor, email the president. I can give you the website for the president, Biden, whitehouse.gov/contact. You can contact the president. Contact Eric Schmidt, schmidt.senate.gov. Go to his website and share your thoughts. It's not simply voting, following up your representatives and having your voice heard. That's the most important thing, not just getting voting or registering, but contacting your elected representatives and tell them your thoughts, like we're talking about here. To me, that's more important than anything. A lot of young people don't feel they have any power. What percentage of our population is under 40? You guys have more power than you'll ever believe, but how many of you vote? How many get your voices heard? Talk to your friends.
Yeah, just to piggyback on, because we're just about out of time, but absolutely with the voting issue, you guys don't vote, so politicians often ignore young people because they know you don't vote. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22, but if you want to be heard, vote in the next election, vote for Congress, vote for everything, and get out there and vote, and politicians will pay more attention to the next generation. But if you guys don't show up to vote, older people, retired people, 65 plus, that's who votes, and that's who gets the ear of politicians because they show up and vote. So it's kind of a catch-22. I know you don't feel like your voice is being heard, but it's in part because your voice isn't being heard because you are not voting. So just be aware of that. Thank you so much.
You guys are great. Thank you for your hospitality. Appreciate it.
And don't forget, there's tons of events. There's one more event today, and then there's 10, 11, 30, and 1 o'clock, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. All kinds of events.